Hey crowd, it's Koma here to share my knowledge with you once again. As y'all know by now, the VTuber craze is sweeping the anime streamer industry. There are tons of new creators on here, on Twitch, on TikTok, and even Instagram. And as you'd expect, I see a ton of creators on here talking about how this came to be. Many talk about the ones that we all know and love, like Gargura or Code Meiko. Some even go way back when to talk about the OGs, before even Kizuna Ai. But honestly, that scope is just too small. You need to think much, much bigger, and much, much further back in history. Those of you who have been around as long as I have can understand where this is coming from and what paved the path for the VTubers of present. But since many of you don't know, I'll take you on this journey, from the origins of Vocaloid in the early 2000s, through the rise of Doujin music in UTAU, and finally to the present day with the VTubers you all know and love. So sit tight and listen. So let's start with Vocaloid. So when most people think of Vocaloid, the twin-tailed internet diva Hatsune Miku comes to mind. But Vocaloid's a lot more than just a single character, and it has a lot more history and influence than just Miku's voice. In fact, Miku didn't exist until Vocaloid 2, let alone the production of any Japanese Vocaloid Doujin work. The voice synthesizer software itself was what gave many artists a chance to add vocals to their music, and it eventually became its own huge subculture. Not only that, but it also spun off other efforts and subcultures like MikuMikuDance and Voiceroids and UTAU, all of which I'll talk about later. Surprisingly enough though, Vocaloid is still contained to a niche community in the West when compared to Japan, even if Vocaloid Software was originally released for English-speaking producers. So what's Vocaloid? The Vocaloid software is a singing voice synthesizer which owes its roots to the research done at Pompeu Fabra University in Spain around the early 2000s. It was originally a joint research project to explore human voice and synthesis in the field of singing. Jordi Bonada was the researcher who led the project with an extensive background in music perception, vocal characteristics, and overall sound theory. But the one who really pushed the commercial application and research into synthesis for Yamaha's R&D division was Hideki Kenmochi. The same team then also founded the voice synthesis company Voctro Labs, which still assists Yamaha R&D with Vocaloid and were the creators of Bruno and Clara, the first Spanish-language virtual singers. In 2003, the first version of Vocaloid was announced in Germany, and it started to be used later that same year. At first, the Vocaloid software might seem a bit daunting, and I wouldn't blame anyone as the number of options and settings make it far from a simple task. But the basics behind creating VSTs, the file format used to store score information, are not too difficult to understand. This is the main view when using the software: a piano roll with phrases and added effects. In its most basic form, you can type out what the voice should be saying at a particular pitch, control the duration, and add various effects. In terms of what's required, this is really the bare minimum to get a singing voice out of the software. But the resulting voice might sound less human-like than one might hope without extra effort. That's where the more detailed work, such as pitch bending, vibrato, portamento, and other effects come into play. For example, the turquoise wave with white dots is an example of a pitch bend resulting in a finely controlled vibrato-like effect. Vocaloid was most definitely state-of-the-art in commercial voice manipulation software in its day, and producers understood that. In Yamaha's vision, Vocaloid was intended to be a singer in a box, designed to fully replace a traditional singer. When phrases are typed into the software to be synthesized, a database of phonetic vocal samples is used to modify and produce the final sound. That means that you could take the same VST file, change the singer database, and it would sound like a completely different person. Kind of like the VST voice changing software some VTubers use. Sound familiar? But what's really unique about Vocaloid is the way it's licensed. What Yamaha made available to others was a voice synthesis engine, which would take a voice database and singing directives to produce realistic and melodic vocals, but they did not sell the voice itself. They made the choice to let other companies develop their own voice databases and sell those under different license, and a move which paved the way for the first Vocaloids commercially sold to music producers, Leon and Lola, developed by the English company Zero G in 2004. But these two Vocaloids were not as popular as Zero G and Yamaha had hoped. According to Ken Mochi, the biggest reason their sales were sluggish was because of the packaging and presentation of the Vocaloid concept. As opposed to selling the characters behind the voices, Zero G sold them as virtual sound of vocalists, which resulted in a pretty subdued response. Personally, I think the main failure was a lack of exposure to doujin creators, as MikuMikuDance had not picked up yet. Although producers were interested in the product, it didn't catch on because it was a faceless voice as opposed to a character with a voice. In addition, there was also a backlash because of what is called the uncanny valley in robotics. As synthetic vocals get closer and closer to real human singing, there's a point which the realism dips and becomes off-putting. Whether people were afraid of it or just saw it as a toy, the reception was so bad in the West that the spread was forever stunted. Luckily, the Sapporo-based company Krypton Future Media stepped in with great vision and good timing to help develop the most popular and well-known Vocaloid you've all heard of, the internet diva Hatsune Miku. Well, that's it for part 1. Comment below to let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch part 2 right when it comes out. Till then,